According to a report from The Guardian published in July of this year, half of all US produce is thrown away because it fails to meet cosmetic standards. In a country where 42 million people don't have enough food, tons upon tons of perfectly good, healthy food valued at billions upon billions of dollars are wasted solely because it doesn't look right. Sunburnt cauliflower, misshapen grapes, small scars on the outside of other fruits and vegetables. It's all about blemish-free produce, says Jay Johnson, who ships fresh fruit and vegetables from North Carolina and Central Florida. What happens in our business today is that it is either perfect or it gets rejected. It is perfect to them or they turn it down, and then you are stuck. In noting that this practice of throwing away ugly fruit and vegetables is exacerbating hunger and poverty across our country while also damaging our environment, the Guardian report uses these words, words very much worth quoting verbatim, I think. Quote, Americans throw away almost as much food as they eat because of a cult of perfection. Cult of perfection. That's good writing. And it couldn't be more true. We live in a culture that has an obsession with perfection. We worship the idea of rationally objective, perfect standards. Our fixation with perfection is reflected in our arts and our science, our sports, our system of education, our theologies, our preoccupation with youth and beauty. We even see it in the way that our media crucifies and cannibalizes our heroes after they commit a single moral error because we won't allow our heroes to be less than perfect. We have created impossible fictional constructs chained to that adjective, perfect, the perfect body, the perfect job, the perfect diet, the perfect house, the perfect boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife. That one will get you into a lot of trouble, I'll let you know. I'm the only one that has the perfect wife, so. And I'm the only one that is the perfect husband. We carry within us these abstract ideals of everything, the perfect blank. And we compare and judge everything we encounter in life to its corresponding perfect, completely imaginary Platonic form. But perfectionism is harmful. Take, for example, the photoshopping of magazine cover models. Every photo you see on a magazine, especially photos of the female form that adorn the racks of the checkout lane at Publix or Winn-Dixie, every one of those photos has been digitally altered. Waists are thinned, busts are enlarged, arms and legs are reshaped, scars and birthmarks and wrinkles are deleted, dark skin is lightened. Through years of digitally manipulating these photos, we have quite literally created a standard of perfection in beauty that cannot be attained by a human woman. It has gotten so bad that a few years ago, the American Medical Association took a public stand against the practice of advertiser photoshopping because, quote, such alterations can contribute to unrealistic expectations of appropriate body image, especially among impressionable children. A large body of literature links exposure to media-propagated images of unrealistic body image to eating disorders and other child health problems. Perfectionism has been linked to poor physical health, including migraines, chronic pain, and asthma. Perfectionism is also associated with increased levels of depression, anxiety, and suicide. In a 2007 study, researchers interviewed friends and family members of people who had recently committed suicide. With no prompt whatsoever, over half of the deceased were described as perfectionists by their loved ones. And one researcher specifically noted the unique danger that perfectionism represents to our elder population. Elderly perfectionists are at high risk for many of the aforementioned concerns because while they still continue to hold high expectations for themselves, they are no longer physically or mentally able to meet those high expectations, which then leads to depression, anxiety, or worse. Our cult of perfection is literally killing us. It's a cultural problem, but it is also a spiritual problem, because perfectionism, when you think about it, is a form of fundamentalism, which theoretically should be antithetical to Unitarian Universalist values, yet when I look around, I tend to see a few UU perfectionists, and myself absolutely included in that number. Perfectionism argues that there is but one standard that all else must be measured against, one standard that everything should be striving to attain. This idea is very much at odds with the universalism inherent to our faith, which promotes the idea that there are many paths and many truths, and all are ultimately valued. Understood as a religious phenomenon, our culture's obsession with perfection may have roots in our Judeo-Christian heritage. Now, I want to be very careful here. Honestly, we UUs have a tendency to blame Christianity for a lot of societal ills. And often I think that is an unfair critique, or at least very unbalanced, because much good in our country and our culture and our very own UU faith comes directly from that Judeo-Christian heritage. Now that said, I still think it is fair to say that at least part of our cultural obsession with perfection does come from uniquely Christian ideas, and to address the problem, I think we need to understand the source. The Christian conception of God is unique in several important ways. Most important for our discussion today, the Christian God is perfect. And this stands in stark contrast to the pantheons of gods from other cultures, such as the Greeks. The Greek gods' foibles and failures are legendary. They have more human failings than most humans. In contrast, the Christian God represents perfection itself. He is omnipotent, so perfect in power. Omniscient, so perfect in knowledge and wisdom. Omnibenevolent, so perfect in morality. As a personification of perfection, this God requires perfection from his followers. Jesus famously commands his disciples at the Sermon on the Mount, "Therefore be ye perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." Moreover, there is a specific line of Christian theology that suggests God required a perfect propitiatory sacrifice to appease his wrath and thus create a path of atonement for all humankind. Jesus Christ, according to this theology, was the perfect sinless man and therefore the perfect sacrifice. Even the Christian doctrine of sin is inextricably linked to the idea of perfection. The ancient Greek word translated as sin in the New Testament is hamartia. Hamartia had many applications in the Greek language, but one use of hamartia was in the field of archery. When an archer missed his mark, missed the bullseye, he had committed a hamartia. So in other words, etymologically speaking, sin was understood as a failure to hit a bullseye, a failure of imperfection. If ancient Christianity understood sin as a form of failure, our modern cult of hyper-perfection has also made the converse true. Failure has now become a form of sin itself. To the perfectionist, there is nothing worse, no greater sin than failure. But we desperately need failure. We should celebrate failure. Failure is a great teacher, a necessary step in our evolution, the unavoidable first fruit of taking risks. If we valorize perfection so much, so that we fear failure so badly, that we cease taking risks and stop trying, then all is already lost. A life lived fearing failure and avoiding risk is a self-imposed prison in which you will never know the full extent of what you could have accomplished if you had been willing to simply try. For all this harm that perfectionism causes, many of us are still naturally drawn to it. Why is that? Well, I would argue that the pursuit of perfection is incredibly psychologically comforting because those tiny, fleeting, transient moments where we actually taste a small measure of limited perfection, those moments serve to give us a feeling of agency and power, an illusion of control and predictability in an otherwise chaotic and unpredictable universe. In other words, I think the drive for perfection is a coping mechanism. Now, you may be asking, how do I personally know about this? I've played guitar for nearly 20 years. There were several years in the middle where I let it go. But once I started working here at the church, I picked it back up. So for over the past 4 years, as a hobby, I have devoted myself not just to playing the guitar, but also finding the perfect guitar. This right here, this is a Fiesta Red Fender Telecaster. This is my latest beautiful attempt at perfection. And every time I get a new guitar, I instantly fall in love with it because it is everything I want in a guitar. It's perfect until it stops being perfect. And then I have to get another one to replace it. So I ask myself, why do I even need a perfect guitar? Why do I keep selling, buying, and trading in guitars? So in being very honest and vulnerable here, I have observed in myself a pattern. It seems that I tend to get really antsy about getting a new guitar when things are particularly stressful in my life, when chaos is all around me, when I no longer have control. It might be a loss of control related to my health and my physical body, loss of control regarding my family life, loss of control at work. In case you don't know, it's damn near impossible to control 250 Unitarian Universalists. God knows I've tried. In a chaotic world where we sometimes feel powerless, that illusion of momentary perfection can serve as the clean, well-lighted place that we all crave. But it's not real. It never lasts. Lasting perfection is a false construct, a vain, maddening pursuit that leads only to disappointment, delusion, and heartache. Chasing perfection reminds me of one of my favorite Stephen Crane poems. I saw a man pursuing the horizon. Round and round they sped. I was disturbed at this. I accosted the man. "It is futile," I said. "You can never—" "You lie," he cried, and ran on. Over the past 4 years, at one time or another, I have owned one Martin, one Taylor, one Casino, one Les Paul, 2 Starcasters, 5 Stratocasters, 6 Jazzmasters, and 13 Telecasters. Altogether, 30 guitars. But it's not my fault. I know what you're thinking. All of those guitars, every single one of them had significant problems. Like, the neck just didn't feel quite right, or the color was a bit off when it wasn't in direct sunlight. The sunburst pattern was just a little asymmetrical, or the F-hole was creating all these weird shadows. It weighed 5 ounces too much, or the control plate. This control plate here was like 1 or 2 degrees off, so it wasn't exactly parallel with the bridge plate. The point is, the perfection we all seek, the perfect body, the perfect spouse, the perfect career, the perfect church, the perfect guitar, it's all an illusion. It's a myth. Chasing after it is like chasing after a unicorn. And there comes a point where you need to stop chasing that unicorn and instead just fall in love with the beautiful horse that is already in your stable and just stick a stick on its forehead. In other words, don't allow the shadow of a mythical perfection to trick you into overlooking and failing to appreciate the good that is already now within your reach. If there is a cure for the cult of perfection, I think it may be found in the land of the rising sun. I am Japanese, after all, remember. Among the Japanese, there is a worldview based on an aesthetic known as wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi historically grew out of Japanese pottery and tea ceremonies. Generally speaking, wabi-sabi, in contradistinction to Western values of art and beauty, finds beauty in the imperfect, in the fragile, and in the flawed. Wabi-sabi celebrates the impermanent and the incomplete. It prefers age and use over unblemished youth. Wabi-sabi design elements include asymmetry, roughness, and simplicity. In a way, you could say that wabi-sabi is the art of finding perfection in imperfection. And a related Japanese concept is kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery by fusing the broken shards back together with lacquer and gold. Instead of trying to conceal evidence of brokenness, kintsugi celebrates and draws attention to brokenness and the beauty of its repair. Kintsugi argues that things actually become more beautiful after use and damage. Kintsugi declares, "Your scars are beautiful." I listened to a Japanese craftsman who specializes in kintsugi, discussing his understanding of how a broken vessel can be so beautiful. And he said that objects have no beauty inherent within themselves. The beauty, he said, is not in the object, it's in the person looking at the object. In other words, when we cultivate our own inner beauty, we will begin to see the beauty in this imperfect world we live in. At its core, I believe that fighting our inclination towards perfectionism is actually a spiritual practice. It's a spiritual discipline. We engage that discipline by reorienting ourselves and our values. And to accomplish this morning, I humbly recommend remembering the following. Remember to look for and appreciate the good before you look for and criticize the bad. Remember that failure is not a sin. Remember that you are not perfect and you never will be. Remember that thing you choose to love, that person, that job, that community, that sports team, they will never be perfect either, especially if they're the Jaguars. Remember that the world becomes more beautiful as you cultivate beauty within yourself. Remember that your scars make you even more beautiful. And most of all, remember this: you are enough. You are enough. You are enough. Blessed be.